According to a recent study by the Pew Research Council, Americans continue to have high levels of trust in science. In fact, 84% say that science impact on society has been generally positive, and scientists rank only behind members of the military and teachers as professionals who contribute most to society. In fact, when asked to rate the trustworthiness of various sources of information, including friends, politicians, and religious leaders, scientists were rated as significantly more trustworthy by Americans. Even when the results of science are controversial or assailed in the political arena, Americans continue to have confidence in the scientific community. These results parallel the Harris poll that finds that Americans rate science as one of the most prestigious occupations. Yet despite the value and prestige Americans place on science and scientific results, fewer and fewer Americans are choosing careers in science. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, America now ranks 27th out of the 35 countries surveyed in the number of college students that pursue degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math disciplines. And 10% fewer students now major in science than 10 years ago. Today, far more American college students elect careers in business and education than STEM fields. In fact, over the last decade, more Americans have opted for careers in leisure studies than physical science. American student scores on international comparisons continue to decline. The 2007 Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, TIMSS, sponsored by the International Assessment of Educational Progress, shows that U.S. fourth graders rank 8th out of the 23 countries tested, but fall to 11th by grade 8. TIMSS results fall loosely into 3 tiers, with Singapore and Taiwan in the top tier, Japan, Korea, England, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Hong Kong in Tier 2, and the U.S., Australia, Russia, and Lithuania in Tier 3. Similarly, in 2006, the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA for short, sponsored by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, assessed 15-year-olds' abilities to identify scientific problems, explain scientific phenomena, and make evidence-based conclusions about scientific issues. Here, American students ranked 27th out of the 57 countries tested. While the decline in American student science proficiency is a complicated problem, many science educators have contended that the way science is taught in American classrooms is at least partly to blame. They often suggest that over-reliance on textbooks that take encyclopedic approaches to science, that is, present science as an enormous collection of facts and technical details, comes at the expense of scientific processes and reasoning. Even when these textbooks promote hands-on activity, they rarely accompany minds-on inquiry. For example, over the last decade, the Association for the Advancement of Sciences, Project 2061, has studied the content of science textbooks and has concluded that none of the major secondary series aligns with new inquiry-based science standards and approaches. Despite these problems, the future of science education may be brighter than ever. After 3 decades of research, consensus has emerged between psychologists and scientists about the value of scientific inquiry as the basis for effective science learning. For example, the National Research Council, in the landmark text How People Learn, summarizes the vital link between students' experience, emotional connections, and new learning. In short, we learn what we care about. In addition, inquiry-based curriculum reform seems to be gathering momentum. In Ohio, the legislature passed Senate Bill 311 that creates the Ohio Core. While the Ohio Core doesn't change the number of science courses required for graduation, the context of existing courses is expected to change. Now students must have 3 years of an inquiry-based laboratory experience that includes asking valid scientific questions, gathering data, and analyzing information. The Ohio Core confirms what we've learned from research and our own experiences. Students learn best when they're actively involved in the learning process. The more engaged they are, the more they learn and achieve. While certainly not a new idea, in fact its roots can be traced back to John Dewey in the early 20th century, learning cycle approaches have been developed, implemented, and thoroughly researched across the country. Now, powerful evidence suggests that these approaches that forge connections between student experience, student emotions, and authentic scientific inquiry not only foster scientific reasoning and problem solving, but improve student attitudes and even lead to equivalent levels of factual knowledge in science. The 5Es learning cycle model represents the most current refinement of the learning cycle approach. Originally developed by the Biological Sciences Curriculum Study in the early 80s, 5Es is based on the Scientific Curriculum Improvement Study originally undertaken in the late 50s and 60s. The remainder of this video presentation presents a brief overview of the 5Es: engage, explore, explain, expand, and evaluate. In each section, the element will be defined and examples of student and teacher roles will be given. At the end of each segment, you'll be asked to pause the video and jot down your ideas on the Inquiry is the Answer worksheet. To begin this process, please think about a curriculum unit or topic that you're currently teaching and that you'd like to adapt into an inquiry-based lesson. Please pause the video now and enter the learning target for that lesson on the worksheet. Resume the video when you're done and ready to go on. The 5E's learning cycle begins with the engage phase. Here, brief, compelling activities are used to connect a student's prior knowledge and engage them in the new concept. Consider these guiding questions. What concepts do I want students to learn? What activity, strategy, problem, situation, or event can I use to focus the students on the new instructional task? The teacher role in the engage phase includes some planning activities, including determining the concepts and learning activities that will be needed. But during the actual activity, it's important for the teacher to create interest and generate curiosity by raising questions and probing students for what they know and believe. And here it's also important to model curiosity and enthusiasm for the concepts. Good behaviors to avoid here would be to select topics from the textbook without critically thinking about their scientific value. It's also important to resist the temptation to explain the concepts too much or to provide the right answer from the very beginning. And of course, it's also important to avoid lecturing. The student role in the engagement phase is to engage in the concept. Students should show interest and curiosity and ask questions like, why did this happen? How can I learn more? What have I learned about this before? And it's important for students to make connections with the new information and their background knowledge and prior experience. Students should be encouraged to avoid asking for the right answer or offering the right answer from the very beginning. They should be asked to avoid seeking convergent solutions and to keep their minds open to all possibilities. And of course, we should try to discourage them for focusing on what will be on the test. Please pause the video now and enter your ideas on how you could engage students in your lesson in the Engage box on the worksheet. The second phase of the 5Es is the Explore phase. Here, students explore concepts, processes, and skills in order to learn new concepts and dispel their misconceptions. Students use their prior knowledge to generate new ideas, explore questions and possibilities, and design and conduct preliminary investigations. Consider these guiding questions. What activities will help students acquire new concepts? For example, structured or guided exploration. What materials might you need? Resources, data sets, and how can you encourage students and anticipate answers to student questions? What intellectual work is required? What will students actually have to do? What process should be completed? What information needs to be recorded? And what products should be created? In the Explore phase, teachers should create student-centered activities that connect students' questions to scientific content. They should facilitate student collaboration and ask probing questions. Here, the teacher acts as a consultant, not the main source of information. And it's important to provide ample time for student learning processes to occur. Teachers should avoid the urge to provide answers too quickly, or to provide students with too much directions on how to work through problems. They should avoid trying to provide closure to the lesson too early. It's also important to avoid directly judging student answers as correct or incorrect. Teachers should also avoid the temptation to provide step-by-step directions or to solve the problems for students. Students in the Explore phase should be encouraged to think freely and to test their predictions and hypotheses, and to use those predictions to form new predictions and hypotheses. They should be encouraged to ask related questions and to avoid foreclosing on any particular idea. They should record their observations and discuss their alternative ideas with others. Students should be encouraged to avoid sitting back and letting others do the thinking and exploration for them, or just playing around in the science lab indiscriminately with no attention to the goals of the activity. And students should avoid stopping prematurely with one answer or solution before others are explored. Please pause the video now and enter your ideas on how you will encourage exploration in the Explore box on the worksheet. The third phase of the 5Es is the Explain phase, and here students explore a particular aspect of their Engage or Explore activities, focusing in to demonstrate their understanding of new concepts, processes, or skills. Teachers often directly explain new concepts or skills, Explanation promotes deeper understanding of the new concepts or skills and ensures that students are on the right track. Consider these guiding questions. How will students' understanding be reviewed or summarized at this phase? For example, will you use teacher questioning, student discussion, journal worksheet entries that are shared? What are the critical concepts and terms and skills that must be demonstrated at this phase before you can go on? The teacher role at the explain phase consists of encouraging students to demonstrate their understanding of the concepts to this point. Students are encouraged to explain the concepts in their own words. Teachers ask for evidence and clarification and provide clarifying explanations and terms when needed. And it's particularly important to assess students' growing understanding of the concepts at this phase. Teachers should avoid accepting cursory explanations that have no justification or foundation in the earlier activities. Teachers should ensure that they provide all students with the opportunity to explain their understanding of the concepts to this point. And it's important to avoid interjecting extraneous concepts and unneeded facts and terminology and focus only on what's critical to understand at this phase. The student role in the explain phase consists of explaining their possible solutions and listening critically to solutions offered by others. They should probe others' explanations, trying to arrive at new understanding. Students should use both their prior understanding and data from earlier phases to enhance their understanding. And it's critical for students to assess their own understanding of concepts to this point. Students should be encouraged to avoid proposing explanations with no justification or evidence. Students should be kept on task and to avoid interjecting irrelevant experiences, facts, and examples. Students should be discouraged from accepting explanations that have no evidence, and students should be encouraged to keep their minds open and entertain alternative plausible solutions. Please pause the video now and enter your ideas on how you'll conduct the explain phase for your learning target on the box in the worksheet. The fourth phase of the 5 E's is the expand phase. Here, teachers challenge and extend student understanding. New experience and activities are used to help students develop deeper and broader understanding, learn additional information and skills, and apply concepts to novel, real-world situations. Consider these guiding questions. What are students' previous experiences with the current content, and how might these experiences apply to other problems? What questions can I ask to encourage students to elaborate on the importance of the concepts and appropriately apply the content to high-interest, real-world contexts? In other words, how can I get the students to use what they've learned? The teacher role at the expand phase is to develop activities that build on the current content and encourage students to go deeper. Teachers should also encourage students to connect what they're learning with what they already know and to apply the new skills to new situations. Again, teachers should avoid providing direct, definitive answers or judging students as correct or incorrect. Teachers should avoid providing too much information through lectures or step-by-step directions, or providing easy algorithms that guarantee a solution to the problem. Students should be encouraged to go deeper by engaging in research using books, articles, websites, videos, or other materials. Students should be encouraged to find ways to apply their new knowledge to similar situations. Students should also pose questions to help them develop better understanding and to share their information and knowledge with others, while asking, so what? Why does this matter? Students should be encouraged to avoid ignoring previous information learned in the lesson and focusing only on answers provided by the teacher. They should also be discouraged from focusing too narrowly on solutions, and they should be discouraged from ending their investigation prematurely and foreclosing on other possible ideas. Please pause the video now and enter your ideas on how you would conduct the expand phase for your lesson in the box on the worksheet. The fifth and final phase of the 5 E's is the evaluate phase. And unlike the other 4 phases, the evaluate phase is conducted throughout the lesson. Students continually assess through all 5 stages their learning and progress towards the intended outcomes and learning targets. Evaluation provides students and teachers with information to improve student learning and to modify teaching and learning activities to meet student learning needs. Consider these guiding questions. What key tasks should be used to encourage students' rigorous intellectual work, critical thinking, and self-evaluation? What assessment should be used to measure understanding? And what behaviors and attitudes must students demonstrate in order for us to conclude that the lesson was effective? Teacher roles during the evaluate phase consist of observing students as they apply new skills and providing timely feedback to help students monitor their own learning. Teachers assess student progress towards achieving the learning outcomes and provide systematic opportunities for students to assess their own learning. Teachers should avoid simple tests on things like vocabulary, words, terms, and facts. Teachers should avoid introducing new concepts late in the lesson that might create ambiguity. And teachers should avoid open-ended discussions or digressions that are unrelated to the learning target. During evaluations, students should answer open-ended questions by using observations and evidence from the earlier phases. They should demonstrate their understanding of critical concepts and skills and evaluate their own progress. They should ask questions related to the lesson that help them promote future investigation, and they should be able to describe changes in their own behavior and understanding. Students should avoid drawing conclusions without using evidence or accepted explanations. Similarly, they should be discouraged from offering cursory yes or no or memorized responses. Please pause the video now and enter your ideas on your evaluation strategies in the Evaluate box on the worksheet. Now that we've introduced the 5Es model and had a chance to work through a remodeling exercise with your own curriculum, it might be a good idea to again reflect on why we're moving in this direction. The rationale for using inquiry-based science teaching is so powerful it seems almost tautological. Evidence gleaned from international assessment shows that American students are declining in their ability to think like scientists and use scientific reasoning in their everyday lives. As science educators, you're dedicated to the idea that scientific knowledge and skills are essential in the lives of our students. Inquiry-based science has been shown to improve student skills in science, their knowledge about scientific principles, and most critically, their attitudes toward science. Frankly, it's no fun to ride a tricycle with a square wheel. Inquiry-based classrooms are lively places where teachers promote discussions and explorations. By facilitating and coaching scientific investigations, they create cultures where students are curious and engaged learners. The classroom becomes a laboratory where questions are pursued, evidence is collected, assumptions are challenged, and real science is undertaken. These classrooms are motivating for both the student and the teacher, and they work. Most important of all, we develop students that use the tools of science to engage and solve the challenges in their lives and in the world.